Hi everybody, this is Anne. Sgraffito is a two-step decorating process. Step 1 is to layer colored slips or underglazes over a contrasting colored clay surface. Step 2 is to creatively carve through that top colored layer to reveal the clay underneath. We usually concentrate on the carving part more, but in this video, we're going to concentrate on applying the top coat. Let's apply the underglaze by pouring it onto the clay. I created this press plate and let it dry to bone dry. I'm going to be using the black underglaze as it's the most dramatic against the white. I added a little water to the underglaze as my underglaze was a little stiff. I want it to flow well down the plate. Starting at the top edge, I poured it straight across. I know I want more underglaze to flow down the center, so I added more underglaze there. I began pouring the underglaze in trails along each side of the plate. My goal is to coat about 80 to 85% of the plate with the black. I wish I could tell you that the pour will leave a perfect design every time, but randomness doesn't work like that. So I'm using artistic license and a brush to make sure I have a pleasing design that covers most of the plate. Now I don't want to waste any of my underglaze, so I used my brush to push off the excess underglaze from the plate. All the underglaze on the table went right back in my bottle, and I placed the platter out on my driveway to dry in the sun. Now we'll come back to this when it's dry. Let's try a mug this time. On a curved surface, you need to be a little more strategic with the underglaze than a random pour. I used a pencil to mark off the top 2½ quarters of the piece. Remember, the end goal is to coat about 80 to 85% of it, so I'm going to brush the top portion with 3 layers of underglaze. Don't worry if you go over the pencil line. When that was dry, I switched to a bamboo brush, which holds a lot of liquid. Holding the mug in my lap, I began tapping the barrel of the brush lightly along the top of the mug, splattering the underglaze randomly from the bristles to the bottom section. If your mug is too fragile, just flick the brush to do the same thing. I then took a damp sponge and wiped away any areas that were not to my liking along that bottom edge. At this point, the two sections will still look separate. I wanted them to look more consolidated. I took my brush and extended the border of the underglaze downward like it was dripping into the splatters. My goal is to make the underglaze look like it flowed down naturally to create those branches. When the underglaze was dry, I marked a line around the top border. I'll be using a fine line ball carver to scraffito a design over the pencil line. The coarse diamond head slices through the fresh underglaze like butter. Remember to take normal dust precautions with the trimmings. I then began to carve a border line along the bottom border, leaving a section of black under the carving. To add weight to the bottom of the design, I doubled the bottom border line. Now your eye will travel down the cup. To fill in the center section, I'll do a simple flower design. I drew a half circle against the top border line, then added petals around that circle. I added swirls in the circular section. I slowly and carefully wiped away the clay crumbs using a soft hacky brush instead of blowing the dust into the air. I added detail lines into each petal. I pulled a vine down from the flower and ended it with leaves. I worked my way back up the stem with more leaves. Now here's a mug that I completed earlier with the same design with a few more hanging flowers between the larger sunflowers. To finish it, I used a white liner glaze on the inside of the mug and Amico C11 clear glaze on the outside. I fired it to cone 5 with an 8-minute hold. Now let's try splattering on the interior of a bowl. Like the second project, I used my pencil to draw a wavy border line around 80 to 85% of the surface. I coated the black underglaze inside the pencil marks. This time, I'll be using a piece of cotton embroidery floss to make marks. I used my finger to coat the string with underglaze. Make sure to turn the string so you coat the whole thing. I'm simply laying the string down on the plate to leave the impression of splatters. This is a lot more controlling and less likely to splash back on the rest of your surface. Reload the string as necessary. For some fun little splatters, I used a loaded long hair flat brush and my fingers to splatter the underglaze. You can also use an old toothbrush for this. I'll be using a circular carver for the scraffito work. I thought I'd do some orange slices on this bowl. I began carving various size circles, making sure the circles went outside the border lines. I doubled the borders of the circles to create the impression of rinds. The circular head of the carver follows naturally the concave surface really well. Switching to the thinner fine line carver from the second project, I carved out a circle and extending lines to the borders. I intentionally offset these smaller circles from the centers to add variety. Here's the design I came up with on this smaller bowl. Here's a bigger bowl that I finished earlier, where I had more room to create more random textures and play around with the design and the shape of the bowl. To finish it, I used 3 layers of the Amico C11 and clear glazed the entire inside and rim of the outside of the bowl. I fired it to cone 5 with an 8-minute hold. The platter we poured underglaze on has finished drying. Let's experiment with sgraffitoing this piece. I thought I'd use another Diamondcore tool, the fine line carver. Starting in the upper left corner, I thought I needed a bigger image to act as the focal point for the composition. I carved it so some of the petals would overlap the top border and the black border. My eye travels right to that image now. From that image, I wanted the eye to travel down to the rest of the surface, so I carved a long vine stretching from the larger flower and capping that with a leaf and carving smaller leaves extending from it. Here's one that I finished earlier, where I worked more vines plus several smaller flowers into the corners. To finish it, I filled in the white sections with my white liner glaze, then coated the rest of the surface with Amico C11 clear glaze. I fired it to cone 5 with an 8-minute hold. Let me know in the comments section below what you think of mixing these techniques and which piece was your favorite. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. In any case, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time in the studio. Now here's a mug I pulled out of my